So this poor 87 Plymouth Fury sits out here at the corner of the driveway. It just sits and sits and sits. It's rarely driven. It never has much been used for anything except just local driving and no long trips, no anything. And there's one big reason behind this, and that is that this car has never really ran right since I've owned it. I've owned it about 14 months, 15 months, something like that. I think I bought it last October, and I've just struggled relentlessly since then to get this car to run and drive seamlessly, and it does not want to ever seem to do that. So I've taken steps to hopefully cure that. When I started out, let me back up. When I started out, this car had all its original lean burn equipment on it, which this was a closed loop lean burn, which means that it had the lean burn unit, had a lot of sensors on it. Had things like air intake temperature sensor, it had crank sensor in the distributor function, all this stuff. So it ran off the sensors, and it had the original 6280 Holley 6280 two-barrel carburetor on it, which was not working right for whatever reason. It had been the carburetor part of it had been disabled. That thing has a crude mixture control settlement in it, and it was just not even plugged in anymore. So this car just ran very poorly. So the first thing I did to try to remedy that was I built a regular Holley 2280 carburetor, which is the same carburetor minus the electronics, and put on it. And then I built an HEI ignition system for it. And to do that, to just use the regular old style electronic distributor with a vacuum advance. So I did that, and it improved it. It actually ran smoothly for the most part. The carburetor was not right. The first one I built was not right. It just would not run off the main circuit. It started starving for gas and it quit. And that was one problem. So I built another carburetor for it, which seemed to run better, except that it sort of, you tell it's really lean. It's calibrated too lean for one of these, and I'll explain why that is here in a minute. But that was one issue. That was one part of it. And then the other part was that ignition system was not reliable that I built. And I'll take ownership of that. I built it exactly the way you're supposed to do it, the whole 9 yards. New coil, new module, new this, new that, everything. And it just, I think more than anything, it was just the fact that the ignition system depended on plenty of voltage while it was starting, and this car could not supply that. The electrics in these cars are just not very robust. The alternator's not robust, and things like that. So it had its issues. It would just get where it was hot, and it would just lose spark while you're trying to crank it. It wouldn't have enough energy in the electrical system while it was running the starter to also fire the ignition system. And I know people might say, well, that's not possible. Or they say, well, this one it was, because what it would do, occasionally it would, if you let off the key, if it was just in the right spot and it just managed to spark, it would fire up and run. And it got worse and worse, and I didn't trust it, because it almost stranded me in Huntsville one day. It was raining real bad. Just didn't want to start. So I've got about 5 years ground on that starter, and I don't know how it's still working, but it is. Anyway, nevertheless, I've decided that we're gonna fix this once and for all. I don't care what we have to do. Even if we have to take drastic measures, we're going to fix this. We're going to make this car run reliably, and we're going to cure its starting problems. We're going to cure its running problems, and so on. So to that end, I have ripped out the HEI system totally, and I have grafted in the original Mopar ignition system from that 73 Plymouth, the green one, which got scrapped. But the ignition system was still good. This is the one that's got the ballast resistor and the ECU unit and all that. So it's just what was used originally on an older car. And everybody says, well, the HEIs are more reliable. Well, the HEI is not more reliable in my estimation, because you're just basically trading one set of issues for another. You have a module that you can't get an American-made module anymore. I don't care where you look. If you can find one, point it out and show me a picture. And then you have, it's supposed to run a relay with them and things like that. So this one, like I said, this one never ran right with it. Never started right, never did anything very well. So anyway, went back to that, and it seems to be starting right up every time now. But the carburetor gave more problems with the choke, and so I ripped off the Holley 2280 that I had built for it, and I found another Carter BBD standard Carter, which was the late 70s, I think it's a 78, and built it, put on here, and it's still not right. And I'll tell you exactly what's up. It runs okay when you start it on the choke, but when you knock it off the fast idle, it just quits, won't idle at all. So I discovered pretty quickly what's going on with this, so I'm going to lead you through this without trying to make a big long video of it. But what happened is, I put in my last video, I think it was, I said the carburetor was junk. Well, the carburetor's not necessarily junk. I kind of overreacted, I guess. But what the deal is somehow or another, I got this out of the junkyard, the carburetor I'm talking about, I'm about to show you. And, you know, there's the only one there was, so I grabbed it. It looked like it had never been rebuilt, had its tag still on it and all that, but it's one of these that was on the first versions of the lean burn, which in that case was not a closed loop, it was a what they call an open loop, which means the carburetor itself didn't have any sensors in it, but it had all this crap on it, like just, it was to interact with the lean burns. So it had a ground switch, it had originally supposed to have a throttle transducer, and the problem is also that this carburetor has got restrictors in the idle circuit down at the bottom in the base plate, which I saw those, and I should have noted that, and I didn't. This is the first time, excuse me, the second time I've been bit by that. I also built another 2280, tried to use that old base plate, and it was the same way. Right about 1978, 79, they started trying to restrict the idle circuits on these, and so they don't run right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this carburetor off one last time before I throw it and all the rest of them in the garbage and get an old carburetor, about a 73, and use that. That's plan B if this doesn't work. But I'm going to try one last time on one of these late model BBDs to make it work, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. So let's go in there and look and see what we got. Okay, then here this thing is, and like I said, this is a 1978 model year carburetor. The tag on it, I think, says 151.8, which means 151st day of 1978. The part number is 8175S, and it's directly interchangeable with the 2280. And as you can see, there's no electronics on this. Now, there are a couple things that I don't know if this carburetor has been screwed with already once in the past, but yeah, this big bracket right here, it's got a couple things on it that, if you look down in there, you see that thing with the wire connected to the side of it right there. That's a ground switch. So when the throttle screw, idle screw hits that, it's supposed to send a ground signal out to the, I guess, to it. Some of them do it. They do all kinds. I read a paper on it. They do different things. Some of them ground the distributor to retard the timing at idle, and some of them send a signal to the lean burn that starts a counter for some reason. I don't know. I tend to believe the first one on this one, but that little hole right there, now whether this one had or not, I don't know, but what originally was supposed to go there in that thing was called a transducer, and it was a cylindrical unit with a couple terminals on it, and then it had an arm that originally, you see that green dot right there, that's the end of the throttle shaft. Now this one doesn't have a provision for it, so I'm not sure it had it, but originally it would have an extended throttle shaft with a little clamp thing on it, and it had a rod that went out to that, or a link or whatever, went to that little transducer. And so it was like a very, very crude throttle position sensor, and it was supposed to tell the lean burn master control unit there what you were doing with the accelerator. So it could, the gist of this is, it just told the lean burn how to make it even more lean burn. So it did all this stuff to make it run worse, you know, in the name of emissions. So that carburetor, I probably couldn't have chosen, if I had a choice, a worse one, but we're going to try to make it work. We're going to try to modify this idle system if we can. I got to get it apart before I show you what's the deal with it. But anyway, let me just speak about this real quick on these model BBDs. There's two different BBDs as far as their design. Now this one's the later version, the 74 onward, and it's called a 10 top, or it's got a high top or something like that. Hang on. So it's called a high top or a 10 top or stuff, whatever you want to call it. But the 74 onward they used this type exclusively. It's all there was. The older 73 on down doesn't have this raised part right here. It's just kind of flat, and it's got a arm that comes across, and it's got the end of the accelerator pump link sticks up right there. Some of them have a little vent down there for this thing. But everybody you talk to seems to say the same thing, that this is a better carburetor. It's better to use, better do this, better do that. Well, if you ever read a paper on these things directly from Carter, then you start to realize very quickly that that's not true. Now these have this arm in here. I'm not going to go into that, but suffice to say that it's got a lift mechanism, which means it's plastic piece in there that's connected to this arm. It's got two little fingers on it that serve to lift the power valve with the two main needles, metering needles on it, metering rods, excuse me, up. And well, I think they control them. That maybe not always let them up, but anyway, everybody preaches about this. Oh, this much better carburetor. But as I said, if you read the paper on this, and I'll be glad to put a link in the description for this video, that you quickly realize that everything they do to these carburetors, everything they did to them, they changed the way they meter fuel, they changed this, they changed that, and put those restrictors in there. It was not to make it work better. I don't know why people say that. They say that's a better carburetor. Everything you read about that says the same thing. It says, well, this is to allow more precise control of emissions and hydrocarbons, and reduce hydrocarbons, reduce emissions, reduce this, reduce that. So I'm all for a clean environment, but when they changed this from the early ones they used from like about 1954, 55 up through 73 to this style, it was not an improvement. I don't care what you say. It was not, because they changed it because the old style slobbered fuel in here more inefficiently, but it ran better. It didn't have the problems. These things are known to have problems. They have base plate problems, they have idle problems. You see things all the time about these cars. Well, it won't idle right. Well, it's probably because people get these like I did. They've got the restriction in the idle circuit, and so it's never going to idle right. So we're going to try to fix this. So let's get on with this. Got to rip this thing back off. Oh, scared the crap out of me. Moms are coming. We're going to rip this thing off here again, one last time, tear into it, so what we can do with it. So here these two jewels are. This is the BBD here on the left, and this is the 2280 on the right. And people ask what's the difference in them. Well, there's not any. They're both troublesome pieces of shit, if you ask me. So it's just a poorly executed attempts to pass emissions and all that. So in my estimation, they don't run good, they don't work good. But we're going to take one more shot at this one. So this one I don't like this one, because this one's got a nitro-filled float in it, which has got two floats on one arm, but they're that black plastic, and they're known to stick to the bottom for some unknown reason. But these carburetors are both linkage bending, just this, just that, move this, move that, nightmares. So I don't like them, and I don't like the later versions. Now the early version of this one, I've always had good luck with it, and that's what's going to go on that car. If this one doesn't work right off the bat, if I put it on here one more time, it doesn't work right. If it doesn't work right, it's in the garbage. It's going right in this garbage can. It's not worth anything. Or junk. So we'll try to make it run. The whole reason I don't go ahead and just put the 4-barrel on it that I got all the stuff to do it, but it's cold, and I wanted to just drive the car finally through the winter. So anyway, let's tear this thing apart. Got this base plate off, this BBD carburetor, and if you look at those small recesses there, you'll see that there's a brass insert in each one of those, and that's directly above where the idle mixture screws go in at there, and then you flip it over and look on the inside part of that, and there's a little hole there, and that little hole there, that's where the mixture screws come into, and they just meter fuel and air mixture through that to let the car idle. But I've got my other one that I was thinking about using, another base plate, and you see it doesn't have those inserts, but this thing is in rough shape. It's rusty, it's been sitting outside and stuff, and it just doesn't look good. And the one thing I noticed, it doesn't have an EGR port. It's supposed to have it up there, doesn't have it, so junk. So we're gonna have to go a different route, which is okay with me. I don't like these carburetors, so we're gonna go a different route right now, and we'll show you what we're gonna do later on. Well, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do now. In the meantime, I'll show you, and then I gotta order another carburetor off eBay. I've already found one, so we'll see what that is on another video and get it built and put it on, and hopefully this thing will finally run right before I set fire to it. Okay, so made my executive decision on this, and I'm going to give Holly here one more chance to prove itself, because it turned out that I had made a mistake when I put this carburetor on the way I ran the vacuum lines, and I had neglected to make sure everything was clean with the vacuum line. So if you look on the back of this thing, let's sidle over here. It's got a selection of ports here, and there's three. There's one large one, two small ones. That one there is manifold vacuum, and it normally runs this choke pull off. And then this one down here is also manifold vacuum. It goes into the same port as this large one for the PCV valve. And so what happened about a month ago, I guess it was, I just noticed I had worked on this choke because it would kind of run a little bit too rich when it was cold. And so I had fingered this thing as the culprit, so I switched it out with another one. It was the one that was on, it was leaking a little bit. It worked, but it was leaking vacuum. So this one works good, but I noticed that at some point right after that, I know what I did. I made a mistake. I own up to my mistakes. I had it connected properly. I had it connected originally. I had it connected here to here, and that was right, and it worked, but it still did it a little bit. So for whatever reason, I got this idea in my head that maybe this port down here would be better, because it's directly, I knew that it's directly routed into this one also. So I thought that would be a good strong signal. So it's just one of these things where you get this idea in your head, and it turns out to be, it wouldn't have been a bad idea. It would have worked just fine. But I noticed right after that choke just like really, it just went full rich when it was cold. I mean, just low, couldn't even hardly keep it running. So long story short was, I got to look at this. I had this thing off already anyway to experiment with that other stupid carburetor. So I was looking at this, and I thought, I know that's a vacuum port there. So I sprayed stuff into it, and it just shot right back out like it wouldn't even flow through here. So looking up in the port right there, and tried to run something through from the outside, and come find out this thing, this port here, was plugged up with carbon. I just took my drill and had to drill through all that crap. Black junk all over the drill bit there, and had to drill that thing out and get it where it would actually flow vacuum and flow anything. So I had neglected to check that, so it was plugged up. So when I rerouted it, what I did was I rerouted this thing to that one down here, and of course there's no vacuum signal because the thing was stopped up, so this wasn't working. So as you see, I caused my own problems. I thought I knew what I was doing, and it would have worked, but I didn't know that this thing was plugged up. So now I'm going to put everything back like it's supposed to be, and just put this thing back on. We're just going to run it because it worked well enough. You know, it's got a new float in it and all that, and I'm done. I'm done with that. I'm done with all this because I'm done messing with it. The more time I spend trying to chase rabbits down holes like this is the less time I have to work on my old stuff, and that's not going to work. So I'm going to run this thing, and if I do anything, and I know this is probably going to be one of these things that you just don't need to touch it, and I may just take my own advice and not touch it, but if it's very, very easy, I may see if I can get a little bit more accelerator pump stroke on it, but I'm thinking right now I'm not going to do that. So I think it's going to go back on as is. This is a Venturi signal. I'm going to pull this tube out and seal this so I don't have to have a cap on it. So all right guys, well, this is just one of these videos about something that's going on in the background that's caused me a minor amount of irritation, and I'm going to resolve it. I'm going to win. I'm the winner. So I think that's all to say about it. So I appreciate you watching, guys, and coming and visiting me here in my little shop, my little garage, and the things I do with these old cars, and the problems I run into, and the things I even cause myself sometimes. So, of course, as Kellyanne Conway says, we're not perfect, we all make mistakes. So, anyway, please give a thumbs up if you like this. You know the drill. So, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you, hopefully, on another one. See you later.